CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
Hey, this is former heavyweight contender Baby Joe Macy, and you're listening to Tim Graham and Friends, even though Tim's never taken a punch in his life.
Who's in the NFL here? You? You? How about you, Tim? You, Tim.
It's Tim Graham and Friends, and we have all kinds of ways we can go with this, Jonah. I am Tim Graham of The Athletic, and this is Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. Jonah, we can start with the Bills and their coordinators. We know all three of them. We can start with the Sabres entering the Olympic break on a 2-game losing streak, and the fact that they were maybe sputtering a bit even before they lost that game in Tampa in overtime, then followed it up with that ugly performance last night against the Penguins in KeyBank Center. We can talk about the Super Bowl, all the interesting prop bets that are out there, the local connections such as Doug or Not, Doug Marrone, Stephon Diggs, Mac Hollins. Hate watching the Patriots. I'm interested in the Pro Bowl getting 1.9 million viewers on Tuesday night. That is about the same as an episode of Matlock. I looked it up. I have some other comps that I can give you regarding what 1.9 million viewers is in on television these days. I'm going to probably have to at some point talk about my mothballing the Pro Bowl as a descriptor of players, with Shedeur Sanders and Joe Flacco being in the game. You know, I get it. You know, I sometimes when I write about Deion Dawkins, I want to say however many Pro Bowls he's been to, 3-time Pro Bowler or whatever. But now it's just Shedeur Sanders, Pro Bowl quarterback, and now Deion's back making the rounds on the talk shows this week at the Super Bowl, so he can crow about how he was right and everybody was wrong about Shedeur. He's a Pro Bowler as a rookie. I mean, clearly they were just trying to salvage ratings any way they could. Let's throw Shedeur in there and see if people tune in.
Well, there's a distinction between the players who are voted in to the Pro Bowl in the first round and the alternates. Now, when we go on...
Yeah, but I shouldn't have to explain that every time. A Pro Bowler is a Pro Bowler.
Well, I think a Pro Bowler is a Pro Bowler and the alternates are not Pro Bowlers. When we go on Pro Football Reference and they list the years when players made the Pro Bowl, that's only the
alternates are on there.
Bowlers.
Dawson Knox was a Pro Bowler. Let me look again, but Dawson Knox, he was an alternate. He went to the Pro Bowl. Dalton Kincaid is a Pro Bowler as an alternate. Pro Football Reference. Dawson Knox is a one-time Pro Bowler.
Well, I think that
2022
distinction should be made. The difference between real Pro Bowlers and backup Pro Bowlers.
Doesn't matter if you were the second or third alternate. If you're, and there isn't even a Pro Bowl game anymore. It's just this flag football thing. They even call it the Pro Bowl games, like it's the underwear Olympics. Shedeur Sanders, one-time Pro Bowler. Yep, it's already up on Pro Football Reference. So, yeah. But it's hard when it matters. Yeah, I don't want to pick my spots. I shouldn't have to pick my spots. I think the Pro Bowl, much like the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the Bill Belichick thing. I don't know if we want to talk about that. But
I got to take
Bill Belichick not being a first ballot Hall of Famer has, to quote Peter King, wounded the Pro Bowl, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame. Jesus, I guess it's about 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I guess
And
is
if
where I have to say 6-7.
when Bill Belichick gets into the Hall of Fame, if it's next year, does the wound heal, or is this a permanent wound of tremendous outrage because Bill Belichick was not a first-time Hall of Famer?
It's not outrage, but it's a wound because it's credibility. I mean, of course, he's a Hall of Famer and the first ballot aspect of it. And whatever reasons, I know that there's a procedural quirk to it, and you're only allowed to vote for so many people in these different categories. But that committee, that coaches, seniors committee, executive committee, although, they were only sent one guy. They could have sent more. They sent only Roger Craig, not L.C. Greenwood, not Ken Anderson. So the class could have been bigger, but the Pro Football Hall of Fame botched it. And whether it was the
Well,
voters or the process, it's still it makes Canton look stupid.
you could say that, and I don't necessarily disagree. And Bill Belichick is a Hall of Fame worthy coach and probably has a good case for being a first ballot Hall of Famer. But let me ask you this: do the busts say first ballot, second ballot, third ballot? Is that once they're in, how much do we know? How much do we remember about who got in on what round of voting?
Well,
And
usually
I
the
think you can
ones
remember, but is that in the permanent record?
no, it's well, yeah, it's recorded somewhere. It's not on the bust, but I don't think anything's on the bust. It's not like the plaque at Cooperstown, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's just your bust. So there's no, you can go to the website or there's an interactive thing. I'm sure it's been a few years since I've been to the Pro Bowl, but there's the Hall of Fame. I keep saying the Pro Bowl. I don't know whether I'm besmirching the Pro Bowl or the Hall of Fame when I mix them up, but
Um, well, and I think that Bill Belichick is a Hall of Fame coach and deserves to be in and probably merits first ballot selection more than many, many other uh, NFL coaches. But I do think the procedural quirk is valid for how it played out that way. And I don't think that Bill Belichick should be a 2026 Hall of Famer. He was fired 2 years ago and still wants to coach in the NFL, is still coaching in college. And I just don't think the timing is necessarily right for Bill Belichick to be going into the Hall of Fame. I'm not even sure Bill Belichick himself feels like the timing is right for him to be going into the Hall of Fame. So if, however, this played out and it keeps Bill Belichick out of the Hall of Fame for now, but he gets in later, I think the outrage is a little bit misplaced. And I don't think it ruins all of the credibility of the Hall of Fame because Bill Belichick is not in this 2026 class.
I don't mind that point in that it's a criticism of the Pro Football Hall of Fame's uh, criteria or um, the wait time. You have to wait 5 years as a player, but you don't have to wait 5 years as an administrator or a coach. And I think you should have to wait because if that was a reason for voters to say, well, he might coach again. True, but that's not the rule. That's not what you're supposed to look at when you're voting on it. But it could be in the back of your mind of, well, he could be coaching in the NFL and next year, and should you be a Hall of Fame coach and still be active? I get that,
He
but
did retire.
The Hall of Fame eliminated that for coaches, so that should not have been a consideration, but I'm sure it was. Um, I was Brad Ryder, a good friend. Uh, has a weekly event, a trivia show that he does called the Brain Vault, and it's at the Cas Tuesday nights, 7 o'clock. Great time. I've been to both of them already. It's new. It's a new thing. And at the inaugural episode, I had mentioned from the stage that right before we started, news had gotten out that Bill Belichick was not a first ballot Hall of Famer, and it was a sportsy kind of crowd. And I thought it would get a cheap laugh or applause line. And I was a little surprised that the response was an audible gasp. Now, these are Bills fans who are in attendance, mostly male, a lot of, again, like I said, people who I know, people who who are in sports. I don't know if I want to be naming names as to who was there and who gasped or didn't applaud, but um, I thought that was striking. That there was no laughter or applause. It was just you could hear the air come out of the room for a couple of seconds, People were stunned that Bill Belichick, of all people, is not a first ballot Hall of Famer. Shedeur Sanders, though, is a first-year Pro Bowler. 1.9 million viewers. Other shows that get 1.9 million viewers. This was from a couple of weeks ago. It was the most recent rating
TGAF,
that I could
that's
find.
what we average.
Hell's Kitchen, the Rachel Maddow show, which isn't even on network or mainstream cable. That's an MSNBC show, or MS, or whatever they've rebranded as. FBI, Matlock, the Today Show third hour, Stumble. I don't even know what Stumble is. A game show, maybe? I don't know. General Hospital, daytime soap opera, got more viewers than just one episode, by the way, not all week. One episode of General Hospital a couple of weeks ago got 2.04 million viewers. So that's even better. Boston Blue, Dirty Talk, Hollywood Squares got more viewers than the Pro Bowl. Sheriff Country, St. Denis or Saint Denis. Well, Saint Denis would be Red Dead Redemption. St. Denis Medical, or however they're pronouncing that. NCIS, Grey's Anatomy. The show's been on for 55 years. Got 2.2 million viewers. 48 Hours Presents, Bold and the Beautiful. We're talking about dwarfing the Pro Bowl. Hunting Party. Don't even know what that is. This Week with George Stephanopoulos got 2.7 million viewers. Mass Singer, 2.7 million. Well, I don't know. Price is Right in prime time, 3 million. Let's see, what's double? Let's see what got 3.8 million. An episode of Law and Order Special Victims Unit, 911. Shifting Gears. I don't know that show. Will Trent, friend of the show. Daniel Thompson is the creator of Will Trent. He's getting good ratings, 5.4 million. So anyhow, terrible. End it. Put it out of its misery. Put a tent around it. Put a bullet in it.
Well, yes, that you're making the point that because it's only getting 1.9 million viewers, it's not worth having anymore. But I'm looking this up. The NHL All-Star Game, the last time they had one, only got 1.4 million viewers. Basketball draws more, 3 something million. MLB All-Star Game, 7 million. So yeah, it's a low audience. But I'm a little bit more impressed that the Pro Bowl, is insignificant as it is and non-competitive and non-entertaining in many ways, that it still drew 1.9 million. Seems to show something about the strength of the NFL brand, that no matter what they do, at least draws as well as a daytime soap opera.
Well, as you would say, they juke the stats by putting it on Tuesday. This wasn't a Sunday event anymore. This isn't up against real sports that you would have over the weekend. This was put on a Tuesday night. And I think that Shedeur Sanders probably helped those ratings. People were tuning in I think he was the only guy I was looking for. We were at an establishment that Tuesday night, and I was glancing up at the screen, and I just wanted to see what was, is Shedeur embarrassing himself? How many interceptions is he throwing to a guy in a bucket hat? And everybody's just goofing around and grab assing at these things. But, they bring out some special guest stars and whatever. But 1.9 million, not great on a Tuesday night. I mean, you could probably say, wow, a Tuesday night, how can you get, but the reason they put it on Tuesday night is because if they'd ran it on the weekend, it probably would have gotten crushed by auto racing, or was the Australian Open still going on? I think that was over with at the time. We'll talk about the Bills in a little bit. Really not a lot with the coordinators. Let's talk about the Sabres. Jonah, you were at the game last night, and we've all been watching pretty closely. Sabres you can't argue with the results. And heading into the Olympic break, they're still one of the hottest teams in the NHL, although a couple of clunkers. Tampa Bay, late goal in regulation to go into overtime, in which the Lightning then score and win. You can justify that. You know, a lot of people they were rationalizing, well, if you'd have told me they'd go down to Florida and get 3 out of 4 points, I would have taken it. Well, true, but 4 points were there. And then the ugly, abysmal performance Thursday night against the Penguins in the pre-Olympic finale. Where do you think the team stands right now, Jonah? And Alex Lyon had what I thought was my favorite quote, or the most resonant quote, coming out of Thursday night, saying that this could be a blessing in disguise, or maybe even said it is a blessing in disguise. He may have been even more emphatic than could be, by saying, get a little wake up call heading into this break. It gives us something to think about, because maybe we're starting to take it for granted a little bit, how hard it is to do this and what we've been doing. Smack us around a little bit and give us something to consider.
Well, you asked where the Sabres stand, and I think a simple way to answer that is the standings, and you are what your record is. And the Sabres, had they won last night, would have been second place in the Atlantic Division and projected as around the 4 seed for the playoffs, home ice advantage for that opening game in the first round. Now they are the top wildcard team and 4th in the division, more like the 7th seed, starting on the road in a less favorable playoff matchup. And you know, last week, after their most recent home win, I'm forgetting who the opponent was, but Alex Tuch had the hat trick and said in the locker room afterwards, you know, we're not just going for the playoffs, we're going for the cup. And that was a very well-received comment among Sabres fans, and even just the candor from a Sabres player. We haven't heard that very much.
It felt good to hear it. It felt good to not only hear it, but to believe it and say, you know what? He's not wrong. This isn't fantasy land here.
True. But since then, the Sabres have played more like a team squeaking into the playoffs or hanging on to their playoff spot than a team that was making a run up the standings and towards Stanley Cup contention. And, you know, 4 games in 6 nights is what they played, 2 of them at home, 2 of them on the road, different opponents, but all playoff caliber opponents, teams that are in the playoffs, or Florida being the 2-time Cup champions. So that was a little bit like a playoff series stretch for the Sabres. All teams in the Eastern Conference, they went 1-2-1, lost 3 of the 4. If this is the playoff, they'd be down 3-1 in that series. The game that they won, they played pretty well, scored 5 goals, came back from down 2-0, but they got outshot by 21. So it wasn't exactly their best effort and their best overall performance. So they're not playing as well in the past week as they were in the 7 weeks before that, which was the best 24-game stretch in team history. I guess you're not going to maintain that forever and ever. They played so well for a couple months that they can afford a bad week or a bad night here and there. But they don't look quite as formidable. I said, you know, the playoff odds have them at 70 to 80%, depending on which model you look at, and they look in pretty good shape to make the playoffs, to end this playoff drought. I think we were talking last week how it feels like the drought's already over, and it still does feel like that. They lost 3 or 4 games, and it didn't ruin their playoff chances or put them out of playoff contention. But this notion that they're only going to keep getting better and rise up in the standings and home ice advantage and how many playoff rounds can they win, that's gone away a little bit. And maybe I agree with Alex Lyon that the Sabres themselves shouldn't be thinking too far ahead. And I was getting asked a lot on other shows I do, and I think we even talked about a little bit maybe, that could the Sabres lose their momentum in this Olympic break? And now they don't quite have that momentum anymore. So the Olympic break gives them opportunity to rest and reset and come back for the last 25 games of the season with a bit of a bitter taste in their mouth and something to prove. And so maybe in that sense, losing this last game, I think it was bad for the fans that now they have to have this loss and this losing stretch linger through the next 20 days when the Sabres don't play again, and a week on the road before the Sabres play at home again. But the team itself will probably come back a little hungrier and a little sharper in that week of practice before they play again, because they lost these last 2 going into the break.
The Sabres are in tough in the second half of the season, and they start out of the Olympic break. 4 of their first 5 are on the road. So that'll be a bit of a test. And just for the record, let me give you those. They will return at New Jersey, at Florida, at Tampa again, Vegas at home, at Pittsburgh. And then they have 5 in a row at home, which will be a nice stretch, and then 4 on the road, another West Coast trip. So that'll be, again, a challenge. But the Atlantic Division has 5 teams with points percentage above 600. 5. Nobody else has more than 3. The Metropolitan Division has 2 teams over 600. The Central has 3 teams over 600. The Pacific, no teams over 600. So the Sabres, as great as they've been, it's almost like they have to keep doing this to keep their head above water. The Bruins close behind at 69 points, just 1 point behind the Sabres. And they're pretty good. And you have the Sabres in 4th place behind Detroit, Montreal, Tampa. So, and you have Florida in last place. I mean, if Florida figures it out, everybody, by the way, at 535 or better in the Atlantic Division. It feels like Toronto's done, right? But everybody's got a winning record in the Atlantic Division, every team, top to bottom. And 5 of those teams over a 600 points percentage. So, those are the teams you're going to face most. And that's good hockey. And it'll be exciting and it'll be playoff hockey. But you're right. It does feel like they're in, but maybe that's the danger, is you don't want the people in the building at KeyBank Center in that dressing room to feel like, all right, we're in. Now we need to work on polishing ourselves up for the Stanley Cup. Then again, who's going to make the big move at the trade deadline? Who's going to be the buyer? Who's going to be the seller? You'd have to think that Jarmo Kekalainen is going to be a buyer. You're going to want to see this thing through, end this drought, end it now, get on to the next page, make your mark as a general manager, all those types of things. Similar things probably to what Brandon Beane's feeling right now too, because right now it seems like it's the Buffalo Josh Allens, and the Bills' identity just goes through Josh, and Brandon Beane's going to have to pay that off in some way.
Well, and also this maybe changes a little bit or affects somewhat how the Sabres approach the trade deadline. Now they have 20 days off here to analyze why they didn't play well in 3 of the last 4 games, or even parts of the last 4 games. And had they gone in to this break on such a hot streak, you might think, well, we don't really want to change anything, or we can't trade any of these players that are in our lineup. We don't want to disrupt that, or they're all too good to trade. And now it's a little bit like, what does this team need? What do we need to change? What can we add? And I think the Sabres were going to make some kind of move at the trade deadline anyways, especially with Jarmo Kekalainen, a new GM, and he's known for making moves at the deadline. But this changes the motivation a little bit, and almost frees them up to make a little bit of a bigger swing that could have been unnecessary or risky had they gone into this break on a winning streak.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is coming at a really good time. They've won a lot of games, but they're getting a little wobbly. I think for everybody, it's too long, and every team is going to have its individual take on the Olympic break. But I think the Olympic break is so long that it doesn't matter really how you entered it. I know there's a lot of talk, and Rob Ray was even discussing it on the broadcast with Dan Dunleavy about how, you really want to go in with a win here and how important it is. It's not that important. I mean, these guys are resting. They're they're off to whatever warm locale or back to their cabin or wherever the hell these guys are going to spend the next 2 or 3 weeks. They're already there and thinking about that, and with their families and hanging with their boys and doing all that stuff. I mean, it's 1 loss out of 82 is not going to stick with you that long. So I think that's a bit overrated. Everybody's got this long break, and how they manage it and deal with it, stay in shape. This is like that break in the NFL between the end of mandatory mini camp and training camp, where everybody holds their breath. Don't get a DUI, don't go down to Cabo and get caught with something in your pocket. Don't end up on the police blotter. Don't just let yourself go. Don't drink a 12-pack a day. And every team's going to have to deal with that coming out and not getting off to a sluggish start. And I don't think that I think the Sabres are just 1 out of 32 teams there. I don't think it's like, wow, the Sabres really have everybody does.
And don't get hurt playing in the Olympics, which I don't know if there's anything you can do to prevent that. But I think the worst thing that could happen to the Sabres right now is an injury to Rasmus Dahlin or Tage Thompson, or even the physical, mental, emotional fatigue that they get from not having this break and playing closer to a 90-game season than an 82-game season. And Rasmus Dahlin specifically, who maybe could use this break, could have gone home to Sweden and spend more time with his fiance. Um,
They said Ryan
so
Miller came back. He wasn't the same guy after his Olympic experience. All the weight that was put on that, or you even hear going off to the All-Star game, right? Going to the All-Star game when Ryan Miller went there in 2007, I guess it was, and it was a big event. And Thomas Vanek was in the rookie classic or the young guns or young prospects or whatever it was, and Briere and Campbell and everybody. And what Miller was the starting goaltender, and Danny Briere won the MVP. Well, Ryan Miller got crushed, by the greats because of the type of game that it is, and you lose your confidence a little bit. I mean, that could be, again, that's a goaltender thing more, I think, than a skater deal. But
well,
maybe
and just a couple years ago, Tage Thompson voted into his first All-Star game. He was excited about that. The team, the fans were excited about that. He gets injured in the very last game before the break, replaced by Rasmus Dahlin. But Tage Thompson got an opportunity to relax, and there were pictures of him on the beach for that, week off, and that seemed to benefit him to have that time off and that refresh coming out of that All-Star break. Now, I think Dahlin and Tage Thompson will get some downtime after the Olympics before they have to play again for the Sabres, but the Sabres are going to get healthier, and the time off is going to benefit the majority of the roster. But these two players don't get that same benefit, and they're the two most important players on the team. So we'll see how that goes. Tage Thompson might get a boost from playing on Team USA for the first time, or not the first time, but the first time as Olympian in this level of stakes. Sometimes players get that from being around the very best players in the world and the best on best competitions.
sure.
He might come back an even better player.
Yeah, I mean, you get that juice. You get going there. You get you feel it. Your confidence. Hey, I belong here with the elites, the legends, future Hall of Famers. And it's not like the World Championships, which Tage Thompson was the hero of, got the golden goal and all that stuff. I mean, the World Championships, it's a great national tournament or international tournament, but it also goes on while the Stanley Cup final or the playoffs are going on. It's not necessarily the best players in the world. The best players in the world are still, or many of them are still alive playing for the Stanley Cup back in North America. So you go and guys beg out of the World Championships. They don't, like NFL players do with the Pro Bowl. You know what? I'm banged up. I just don't want to go. And it's considered an honor and all that stuff. But there's a huge, huge jump of course, between the World Championships and the Olympics. Everywhere you look on the rosters and on the ice are future Hall of Famers, legends, the best of the best. And that's not always the case with the World Championships. I just wanted to look up if I recalled it correctly regarding Ryan Miller and what would be the 2009-2010 season when he went off to be the goalie with the 5-1 record for the United States in the Olympics. 2009-2010, he had a pretty good year that year, 41-18-8, 929 save percentage, 222 on the goals against. And but I recall him maybe not being as sharp in the second half. I'd have to look that up.
Well, while you're
UPL
doing
not
that,
playing, UPL not playing is probably good for the Sabres, depending on how bad the injury
right.
is. But
Yeah.
yeah, he doesn't have to deal with that. All right, so through February, then you have the 2 weeks off, and he comes back, and no, you know what? He was still pretty good. He was all right. He was all right in the Olympics. He came back, and from March on was 11, 4, and 1 down the stretch. But that was also the year that they got upset in the first round of the playoffs. The Bruins win the first game and in Buffalo. Or I'm sorry, the Sabres win the first game in Buffalo, and then the Bruins win 3 straight to win the series 4 games to 2.
Well, the
Um,
effect might be subtle and cumulative.
I think
Tage
that's what I was
Thompson,
remembering.
yeah, might come back and pick up right where he left off. He scored his 30th goal last night, on pace for more than 40 goals. Rasmus Dahlin's been playing very well. They might be just as good coming out of the break, but the cumulative effect of playing closer to a 90-game season and these 2 extra international flights and practicing now, not getting the time off that the rest of the NHL is getting, might wear on them in that first round playoff series as they get into game 91 and 92 for these guys. You might not see the very best of Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin in April and May because of these Olympic commitments that they have to fulfill this month.
Jonah, the Bills trotted out their new coordinators this week. The introductory news conferences for Pete Carmichael, the offensive coordinator, Jim Leonard, the defensive coordinator, Jeff Rogers, the special teams coordinator. I think we're most interested in Jim Leonard. That's the most significant member of Joe Brady's maiden coaching staff because he will run the defense. Pete Carmichael is offensive coordinator. He is more of a facilitator, installer, true assistant to Joe Brady, who is going to retain the play calling for the Buffalo Bills offense. Jeff Rogers is special teams coordinator. I think we've learned over the years, special team coordinators, it's all dependent on who they have at their disposal and injuries and all those types of things. Whether it's Danny Crossman or, fill in the blank, name your favorite special teams coordinator.
Bobby April.
Bobby April Jr., his son, Bobby April III, is back on the Bills staff. But you have any takeaways from these news conferences? My main takeaway, Jonah, I think before I ask you your thoughts, is that it's a lot of rhetoric and not necessarily being, for negative. I mean, it's good to hear from these guys, but you're not going to hear Jim Leonard say, I think we're just going to be pretty passive. Bend, don't break. We just want to control the clock as best we can, keep everything in front of us. We're just not going to give up the big play. Of course, he's going to come in and talk about being aggressive, getting after quarterbacks, keep, making sure that offensive coordinators, quarterbacks, centers, everybody's got their head on a swivel because you don't know where it's coming from. And we are going to blitz our safeties and we're going to kooky go nuts defense where you're just not going to know whether to shit or go blind when you play us. Of course, they're going to say that. So everybody getting excited about Jim Leonard. I'm more excited about his reputation, his rankings. No matter what he's done, he's been good at it since he retired from the NFL after 10 seasons as a safety, including 2 stints with the Buffalo Bills. He has done well at Wisconsin. He did well with the Broncos. He's highly regarded from people who have reputations and who you trust. And always has been. Like the moment he joined Wisconsin's staff, people were talking about this guy being a future mind, a future defensive mind, and to the point where he was the interim head coach at Wisconsin after firing their coach at the time. So I'm excited about the Jim Leonard hire. The Pete Carmichael hire I like because he's going to do and has experience with what Joe Brady wants from his offensive coordinator. It's what he's been for Sean Payton over the years with the New Orleans Saints, the butler. He's the Alfred. He'll be your Alfred to Joe Brady's Batman. And then Jeff Rogers, special teams coach. He did not have a good year with the Cardinals last year, but he has had good years in the past. Jonah, your thoughts?
Well, similar to the introduction event for Joe Brady last week, these aren't necessarily news conferences as much as they are opening speeches, opening statements.
Joe Brady's was important because it needs to set the tone. And I think that matters. I don't think the coordinators really matter as much, but Joe Brady, you need him to say the right things. We needed him to do a few things to clean up the mess from the previous news conference of Terry Pagula and Brandon Beane. We needed, or I should say the fans needed to hear him say something nice about Sean McDermott. I think they needed him to respond about Keon Coleman. They needed him to acknowledge some things that whether he did or didn't. But these three guys are new. Joe Brady was carried over. He needed to justify why he deserved this job, I think, a little bit more than these three guys. So anyway, that's just where I think it does make it. There is a difference in
Sure, but I think
executive
you had a
aspect of it.
similar complaint and analysis about Joe Brady's introductory news conference that we didn't learn a lot, and it was more of a
Rhetoric, right.
performance rhetoric. And this was more of that. My main takeaway was that they all seemed like nice guys and good interviews. And I think they're always going to come across that way in their first meeting with the media. But it seemed like a little bit more willingness to talk. And, you know, I might be wrong about this, but my feeling was that a little looser in the coordinators being allowed to speak their mind in these settings with the media and not worry about stepping on the head coach's toes and saying things that they don't want the head coach to hear them say.
I
But
don't think we
maybe
ever
as we
worried
get into
about
the season,
we never worried about that with Bobby Babich. Bobby Babich spoke his mind.
well, I don't know if I meant that as a criticism of previous coordinators under Sean McDermott, although I think there were some that seemed like they were trying to get in and out of those interviews without saying very much or not saying things that they weren't supposed to say. And there's been other coordinators and head coaches, and in some organizations, the coordinators are forbidden from talking, or, you know, I don't know if that's allowed anymore, but it used to be. So I don't know. That was the feeling I got, that these new coordinators seem more loquacious and not as worried about what the head coach thinks of their answers. But that's the first introductory press conference, and they kind of know a lot of the questions that are coming and what answers they want to give. It's not in season and being asked specific to address plays and game plan type stuff. So we'll see how that goes during the season. And as far as the takeaways for the fans, I mean, I don't know. Jim Leonard acknowledged that there will be changes on the defense, but he stressed versatility. He thinks the pieces that they have fit his defense very well. We'll see how that's applied. There's also free agency in the draft to get different players and put that in. Whether the defense will be better, worse, or the same, I don't think you can determine that from a press conference in February. We're not even in March or May or whenever they set the mini camps yet.
I think the big test as to the direction of this team and how different it'll be is free agency. And what if Brandon Beane goes big game hunting? I alluded to it earlier in the podcast. Is he going to feel the pressure to make a big move because he's under the gun right now? He is very much out there and vulnerable, and you know, fucking move the fucking truck up to my fucking house and fucking move me back to fucking home and fuck this and fuck that and fuck the outside and whatever. I mean, seems like he's overcompensating a little bit, but
I think somebody told Brandon Beane about that study where you gain more trust with listeners when you use swear words.
Yeah, fucking right. But it seemed like he's overcompensating there. I also thought it was interesting where he said, "Move the." I've got all my fucks mixed up. I have jumbled fucks, but he said, load up the moving truck and take me home or whatever." He's like, "Isn't this your home? Like, where's home? Like, are you not? Is this not home?" So I just thought that was maybe one of those types of deals where people are, wait a minute, this isn't home. But how you've been here all these years? But he needs a receiver. He knows he needs receivers, and until he gets receivers, he's going to be on the hook for that. And the WGR interview and the behind the scenes draft documentary in which they leaned into that and embraced it and all that stuff. I think that he liked being Big Baller Bean. He liked the fans being on his side, and that's not the case anymore. Now, if he's going to say fuck the outside, all right, fine. But I think that he's somebody who would like for the fans to be back with him and behind him, and maybe he's tempted to make some fucking trades or sign some fucking free agents and make some big fucking moves to help his fucking roster to win the fucking Super Bowl.
Well, and if Brandon Beans listened to this podcast, or maybe someone tells him to tune in because of your epic rant there, the advice I'd give Brandon Bean is it sounds good to say, you're on the same page with the head coach and the continuity and the synergy and all of that. But in practice over the last few years, I wonder if some of the missteps that have been made were Brandon Bean and the management personnel side maybe drafting or building the roster too much in the coach's image, whether it was drafting Keon Coleman because that's who the coaching staff wanted, or the 5 defensive draft picks last year because that seemed to please Sean McDermott or give Sean McDermott what he needed on defense. Kerry Elam in the first round and the disconnect that came about from that, but maybe that was a forced pick. Dalton Kincaid, who's been a good player and wasn't a bad pick, but that seemed like they were desperate to get that player for Ken Dorsey at that
Pro
point in
Bowl tight
time.
end Dalton Kincaid,
Sure.
Jonah.
Well, I don't think Dalton Kincaid was a bad pick, but the motivation behind it seemed a little forced, that they really needed that second tight end for Ken Dorsey's offense. And they ended up firing Ken Dorsey not that long later. And I think Brandon Beane's done better when he trusted his own instincts of just getting the best player. And he sits down every year and says, we're going to take the best player on our board, regardless of position. But they haven't really done that. They seem to be drafting for need or drafting for position or drafting for coaching staff preferences a little too often in recent drafts. And some of their draft mistakes have come about in those ways.
Yeah. There have been a lot of mistakes, signing 2 free agents last year who started the season with 6-game suspensions wasn't necessarily the most prudent thing. And then banking on Joey Bosa being a game changer. Again, we will never know probably exactly who made what picks or who advocated for whom or who stood on the table, whether, Terry Pagula was telling more truth than Joe Brady and Brandon Bean. We'll probably never know because it's CYA time. And maybe it's cover the owner's ass time. Maybe it's, we don't want to get into too much of a who picked whom because I might be on the hook for a couple of these duds, and it's better to let everybody wonder. Schrodinger's draft pick. We're just going to let everybody wonder, and hopefully we come around and they just assume that all the bad ones were this guy's and all the good ones were mine. But I think that free agency will be the first big tell as to what the 2026 Bills will be all about. The Super Bowl. Let's at least touch on it, Jonah. You mentioned it before the show began. Where do you draw the rooting interest? Obviously, anti-Patriots. Bills fans are naturally going to want the Seattle Seahawks to win this game. The concept of Sam Darnold holding the Lombardi Trophy, being the first from the 2018 draft class ahead of Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen to get to the Super Bowl and maybe win the Lombardi Trophy. Of course, that's more palatable than Mike Vrabel and Stephon Diggs and Mac Hollins and Doug Marrone. But rooting interest, where are you?
Right. The prevailing theory, the prevailing feeling is anti-Patriots, whether it's in Buffalo because of the
Robert Kraft. Let's
long-standing
not forget Robert Kraft. He's a villain.
division rivalry, and that the Patriots had so much success and that they didn't pay their penance of being a rebuilding team long enough, and they're back too quickly, and the unlikability of Robert Kraft or different aspects of the Patriots organization or certain players. But there's, I don't feel that it doesn't affect me in that way. I'm not rooting against the Patriots for any of those reasons.
Will you watch
I'm
it?
not really.
You watch it?
I'll watch it. I watched the Super Bowl. I'm excited to watch Bad Bunny at halftime.
Bad Bunny.
And the commercials, I still sometimes get a kick out of those. I'm less interested in the Super Bowl matchup than most years. It just doesn't strike me as the very best teams in the league playing each other in ways that it often does, or the biggest stars. even though you have the MVP runner-up at quarterback and the offensive player of the year on Seattle's team. It's an interesting, I don't know if this factors into the rooting connections, but an interesting tie-in with the Seattle Seahawks franchise in some ways owing their existence to Ralph Wilson and the Buffalo Bills, and Ralph Wilson trying to move the Bills to Seattle, and then that being blocked, and the NFL awarding Seattle an expansive franchise a few years later in response to that. I don't know, in a different universe, this could be the former Buffalo Bills who moved to Seattle playing in the Super Bowl 50 years later. But, I just think it's interesting, the rooting interest, whether it's Bills or Sabres. Sometimes when players or coaches leave Buffalo, the fans like to see them win with another team, and sometimes they hate to see that. And I think there's a lot of that. Nobody in Buffalo wants to see Stefan Diggs win the Super Bowl with the New England Patriots, but maybe they're a little happier for Mac Hollins, even though Mac Hollins, in his comments, seems more bitter about the way his Bills tenure ended, and Stefan Diggs is saying very nice things about
I think Bills
Buffalo.
fans might also feel more bitter about Mac Hollins. They probably wanted him back. So I think that maybe even with him saying that he didn't feel valued last offseason and that the Bills cut him loose, I'm paraphrasing, I think Bills fans agree with that. I think they're sympathetic to that stance.
Mac Hollins, Stefan Diggs was very popular during his time with the Bills, but at the end was less popular with Bills fans than Mac Hollins was in his 1 year and the end of his 1 year with the Bills.
Mac Hollins didn't cause problems.
Right. And I don't think
he was just a weirdo.
An anti-Mac Hollins sentiment from Bills fans watching him win with the Patriots. I think there's more of a jealousy that the Bills didn't keep him and have him on the team this year. Whereas I don't know too many Bills fans. I think there's probably some regret that the Bills don't have a player of Stefan Diggs' caliber anymore in the wide receiver room, and that he's still an excellent receiver, because I think there was some thought that he was on the downswing on his way out of Buffalo, and especially with the injury last year when he was with the Texans, and now he's back. And if he's not as dominant of a player, he's still as prominent of a player and prominent of an NFL personality. There's off the field issues why maybe some people don't like Stefan Diggs, and he's lost popularity over that. But I just think it's intriguing. I mean, are we rooting for the Doug Marrone team or the Leslie Frazier team, or Rick Dennison, former offensive coordinator, is on the Seahawks staff, and there's also Robert Kugler, Sean Kugler's son, who spent some time with the Bills, played for Orchard Park High School. He's the assistant offensive line coach under Doug Marrone. Like, would we rather see Doug Marrone get a win or Leslie Frazier get a win? There's also Alex Austin, former Bills draft pick, who never played for the Bills but was waived at the end of training camp, and he's now on New England's roster. And does that affect the rooting interests at all, whether these Bills win somewhere else or not? Do you want to see them win? Do you want to see them lose?
Well, Jonah, you're mentioning this like it's actually a 50-50, or there's a a debate to be made here. Who among Bills fans would want to see Doug Marrone win a Super Bowl? Over Leslie Frazier also. I mean, unless
he's not a Bills fan, but I think Matthew Fairburn roots for Doug Marrone more than anybody I've ever met in my life. And I think there's some Syracuse people that have some soft spot for Doug Marrone, and I always like the way Doug Marrone spoke wistfully of Cortica Jug.
Yeah. I don't miss him. Hey, let me run. I know that sometimes these can get boring, but I want to see if any of these strike. Just so interrupt me. These are the most popular prop bets, and I'm just going to rattle a few of them off because they're good. So these are the most bet, like wagered on, not the most money. There's different categories here, but these are the bets most frequently placed. Both teams to score in the first quarter. Seahawks margin of victory, 7 to 9 points in the first half. Either team to score a defensive or special teams touchdown in the game. Over 2.5 attempts, pass attempts. That's a pretty cool one, because that could be a botched play. It could be a trick play. It could be a third quarterback getting into the game because of injury or garbage time. So 2.5, that's an interesting one, kind of fun. Both teams to make a 33-yard or longer field goal. Shortest TD being under 1.5 yards, so that's got to be tush push. any 1 yard touchdown there. DeMarcus Lawrence over half a sack. Drake May over 37.5 rushing yards, among the most popular bets. Kenneth Walker under 72.5 rushing yards. Hunter Henry over 3.5 catches. I guess everybody thinks he'll be a busy boy on Sunday. Cooper Kupp over 32.5 receiving yards. And the most favored Super Bowl MVPs are number 1, Darnold, number 2, Smith and Jigba, number 3, Shaheed. Former Buffalo Bill Rashid Shaheed, by the way. A lot of fans at the trade deadline were hoping he would be wearing the red, white, and blue. Instead, he got dealt.
Also, former Buffalo Bills head coach Clint Kubiak.
Oh, yes. So Tom Brady's future head coach. Maybe you want to root against him. If you're looking for a reason to root against the Seahawks, that would be one. Clint Kubiak will be the Raiders' next head coach. Tom Brady, of course, with his ownership stake in the Raiders. So that is why everybody was scratching their heads. Why would Tom Brady say he doesn't have skin in the game when it comes to picking the Patriots over the Seahawks? And it's because his next head coach is the offensive coordinator of the Seahawks. He's trying to play nice. He's trying to be a diplomat.
Another reason I wonder, Bills fans don't need more reasons to root against the Patriots here, but another one, if you're looking to pile on, the Super Bowl loser curse or hangover that affects the team that loses the Super Bowl. Maybe if the Patriots are the team that loses, they'll have a year like the Kansas City Chiefs had next year, and that'll favor the Bills' ability to win the division and have a better playoff path a year from now.
I don't know what it is anymore, but there was a great stat within the last few years about when you lose the Super Bowl, you don't make the playoffs. And there was a pretty high percentage, trend of that being the case.
Continued with the Chiefs and hit them hard. Coming off wins, they were just as good, and coming off a loss, it fell apart.
Jonah, I know you wanted to talk a little Bandits before we wrapped up.
I just wanted to mention, if you asked me what was going on this weekend, kind of a big high school game tonight. Nichols at Canisius, top 4 teams in Western New York. But tomorrow night I'll be at the Bandits game. It's Native American Heritage Night. Bandits player Clay Scanlon, who's from Cattaraugus Reservation, went to Gowanda High School. A big family of lacrosse players, sisters that played college lacrosse. He designed the special jerseys that the Bandits are going to wear. That's often a festive night if you've ever been there, or you can get a ticket. The music and the videos that they play and the traditional dancing and some different things is fun. And the Bandits, Bandits games are high energy and fun overall. The Bandits have lost 3 in a row. They have a losing record. They're out of a playoff position right now. The Philly does have a losing record, and next week they play Halifax, another team with a losing record. So maybe the Bandits have an opportunity to get their footing again and get their stride back and get back into playoff positioning. But should be a fun game experience overall, win or lose. And it's the only thing going on now. The Sabres are off for 3 weeks. There's no Bills. Bandits don't play a lot of home games after this.
The Bisons aren't home for a long time.
The Bisons will be playing sooner than you think. March 28th,
baseball does sneak up on you. How about Big Four basketball? Anything to say there, Jonah or Damon?
I went to UB's game against nationally ranked Miami the other day. They lost by 2 points. They were tied 3 times in the last 6 minutes.
Bad traffic on Millers Point Highway that night.
UB played pretty well. They didn't pull it out. They actually didn't play their best game, didn't shoot their best, but played hard, played well, played good defense, which has been something that UB's struggled on that side of the ball more than the offensive side of the ball. Miami, who leads the country in scoring, had their season low for scoring in this game, 73 points, but Buffalo only
that was their season low, 73?
Yeah, they've been over 80 points in 18 of the 22 games before that, so 18 to 23 games. Hey, if you want to bet,
I didn't realize that.
Let's look this up real quick. Filibuster with me while I look this up. But this Miami team, which is having a great year and was fun to watch, their guards and some of the guys, the way they play, highest scoring team in the country, lead the country in field goal percentage and 3-point percentage. But they're itching to lose. One of 2 undefeated teams in the league. They've had 2 2-point wins against Buffalo and close wins against other teams, and they play.
Do you want to give
at,
a gambling tip, Jonah?
I think they're going to lose against Marshall tomorrow, and I'm looking up this spread because I think that Miami being undefeated and ranked in the top 25 is probably favored in this game. But I think this Miami team is ready to take their first loss, and Marshall's a good team. I'm just trying to find this point spread and see
It's
if
hard
the
to find
Sharps.
college basketball spreads the day before the game for some reason.
Yeah, it
I
looks like this
struggled.
one's
We were looking up a UB
not
game
out.
earlier. Dan Myers is going to shoot us a note about spending too much time looking up a point spread, but
Well, if you can call your local bookie and find, Marshall in the points, I would recommend that. Or if the books are smart enough to favor Marshall, because I think they're the more likely team to win this game in my mind.
9 points.
Is that what you're finding? I would take Marshall at 9 points in this
Odds
matchup. I
Shark.
certainly would.
I don't know how legit that site is. Odds Shark has. Okay, let me click on the link here. Let me get a virus on my computer here.
They are predicting a 6-point win for Miami. I don't know if that's the betting point spread. I mean, Marshall's 15-8 and Miami's 23-0.
Yeah, they're not giving. Yeah, keep an eye on it. But do you think? Well, obviously take the points if you're going to get 9 points or even whatever. But you think it might be worth a bet on to win outright.
That's my prediction. Another prediction is Miami, top 25 team, highest ranking since they had Wally Zerbiak back in 1998, first ranked MAC team since Buffalo was in the top 15 a couple of years ago. But I think Akron is going to win the MAC tournament in Cleveland.
Akron. Okay. Dig that. Let's see. I just found a website that gives Marshall and Miami head to head. So Marshall's not in the MAC anymore. So they
Nope.
played they last played December 2023. And Marshall was a 10.5 point favorite and lost 79-74.
Miami now has the longest MAC winning streak in history, and I might be mistaken on this, but I think Marshall had that record before them, but from like 1968 or something like that. There's some sort of MAC record that Miami broke recently that was a Marshall record from the 60s.
Hey, and just so you guys know, if you're listening and you're really in on this, because Jonah doesn't do this very often. So I'm not trying to like tell you go out and bet, but I think it's interesting that you don't usually do this, right? But you told me this Tuesday night.
I'm not a
You saw this
gambler, and I
team
don't.
live.
I saw this team live. I've been paying attention to them because to monitor if they took a loss and they were going to become in the Buffalo as a top 25 team or not. And they've been winning a lot of tight games or having to come back in games. And they're an undefeated team that seems to be flirting with taking their first loss night in and night out and playing on the road again. And Marshall's a pretty good team from a, Conference USA, good league. I think that this is the loss that they take. And that might be similar to what we said with the Sabres earlier, what refocuses Miami to be even better down the stretch. But maybe the burden of carrying this win streak and being an undefeated team is weighing on Miami night in and night out. It shouldn't have been that close against Buffalo either of the times they played. I was impressed with Miami in some ways.
You should know that the game is at 4:00. So don't think, well, I got plenty of time to research this and place my bet because it's a 7:00 tip. It's a 4:00 tip. I'm on FanDuel right now. I'm trying to find this out. Sorry, Dan. You're just going to have to listen to this a little bit longer.
If the game was on Sunday, you could go to the Bandits game, get your free play from your Bandits ticket, go over to the Seneca Casino and bet on this game with that free play. But
what is it about college basketball that you got to be the day of the game to find it easily?
Maybe it's all the point shaving, taking these games off the board.
Could be. All right, let's wrap this up. Joan, anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up?
No.
Okay. Thanks to everybody for listening. You got your Easter egg of a free betting tip from Jonah Bronstein. You don't even have to share your profits with him. And thanks for listening, for subscribing, for everybody who's been sending in those ratings. So helpful to us. I am grateful if you're able to give a rating, however many stars, a thumbs up, a subscription, comments. The comments have been growing. I like that. I've been in the comments, starting to get some negative comments from people who hate us, Jonah. So we're getting out there. It's not just friends and family listening
Part of
to
the
this
game.
podcast. Yeah, there was a guy I had to block. I'm trying to think. It was something really like he was just being a dick. I can't remember what it was. I'm like, I don't have to deal with this. You know what? This is my podcast. I don't, I'm not, this isn't the New York Times site or the Athletic or I don't have to fucking look at this. One
Listen,
more F bomb. Might as
I
well.
I can take the negative comments. They roll off my back.
I like the
ignore them.
I like pushback, a little discussion, but it was just kind of, I can't remember what it was about.
Well, I'm different than you. I don't argue with the negative commenters much. I tend to just ignore it, but sometimes I get a chuckle out of them.
Well, I'll give a thumb up, which actually is probably passive aggressive, but I give a thumb up to let them know that I read it. I don't want to give it the heart emoji like I love it. So I'm just kind of like, hey, thumbs up. But usually, but there have been some people don't agree with us. We did have a viewer, or well, it could be a listener too. And let us know. We always like the feedback, and we had a good exchange. He doesn't like the AI thumbnails, the YouTube thumbnails that I'm putting on the podcasts. And I've been using some AI to create, an image of Terry Pagula and Brandon Bean shoving Admiral Sean McDermott off of the plank. There was, different ones that I've used. Lindy Ruff with shrugging his shoulders, unsure of his future after the Kevin Adams firing. And people thought it was cheap and whatever. And so I asked, I recall a few weeks ago, and people generally said, no, we like them. But there was a viewer / listener who said it's not good, it's tacky, and I get it. That I should pay an artist to do these. Well, we do this podcast. We don't know what we're talking about. Well, we don't know what we're talking about. You take that multiple ways. But if I were to pay somebody, or even, somebody nice enough to do it on the spot, then we're not going to be able to post the podcast for a couple of days. And then by then, things have changed and you're on to something else. But I can make an AI image to get you to click on it. And the numbers show that people seem to be, hey, what is this? I'm going to look at it. Since I've been using these thumbnails, more people are clicking to check it out. So if you don't like it, let me know. I just like your feedback. And if
what's the image going to
hey,
be for this
knock
one?
it up.
I mean, you got Brandon Bean and all his F-bombs.
How about Shadur Sanders shaking hands with Bill Belichick?
I think it should be Brandon Bean, and then it's like TGAF-bombs, ampersand, exclamation point, all those
I like it. All right, I'm going to
words.
do that. TGA and just a bunch of Fs, or TGAF-bomb.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see what we come up with. You will already seen it when you click on this because it's produced. You already know what it is. Anywho, now you get to see how the sausage is made. Thanks for listening to Tim Graham and Friends.